The harsh Texas sun began its descent behind the rugged hills, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and crimson. Sarah Miller wiped the sweat from her brow as she gathered the last of the wild berries into her woven basket. At 22, she had learned to be self-sufficient on her family's small homestead, especially since her father had traveled to Austin for supplies 3 days ago. Should have headed back earlier, she muttered to herself, glancing anxiously at the darkening sky. The wilderness of West Texas in 1875 was no place for a woman alone after nightfall. Sarah tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear and began the trek back home. Their cabin lay just 2 miles east, but the journey would soon be shrouded in twilight. Her boots crunched on the dry earth as she quickened her pace, clutching her basket tightly. The first howl caught her ear when she was halfway home. A lone wolf, its mournful cry echoing across the valley. Sarah froze, her heart pounding against her ribs. Then came another howl, closer this time, followed by several more. Not a lone wolf, but a pack. "Lord Almighty," she whispered, reaching for the small knife at her belt, a poor defense against a wolf pack, but better than nothing. Sarah began to move faster, no longer walking, but not quite running either. Running would only trigger the predator's chase instinct. The sounds grew closer, and soon she could hear the padding of paws on the hard ground. Darkness was falling rapidly now, the shadows lengthening into a blue-black blanket across the landscape, when she spotted the first wolf, a large gray creature with amber eyes reflecting the last light of day. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It stalked from behind a cluster of mesquite trees, head low, watching her. Then another appeared to her right, and a third behind her. "Stay calm," she told herself, though her voice trembled. "Just keep moving." But the wolves had her surrounded. Now 5 of them circling slowly, their hungry eyes never leaving her form. Sarah clutched her knife with white knuckles, knowing full well it would do little good. Her thoughts turned to her father, who would return to find their cabin empty. To her mother, who had died 2 winters ago, taking with her the warmth of their home. The lead wolf growled, a deep, rumbling sound that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. It was only a matter of time now. She raised her knife, preparing for the inevitable attack. That's when she heard it, a high-pitched war cry that split the twilight air. The wolves' heads snapped toward the sound, ears pricked in sudden alarm. Over the ridge came a rider, silhouetted against the darkening sky, galloping at full speed toward the scene. The rider let out another cry, distinctly Comanche in its cadence and fury. He wielded something in his hand, a torch, Sarah realized, its flames dancing wildly as he rode. The wolves hesitated, caught between their prey and this new threat. With remarkable precision, the rider drove his horse between Sarah and the lead wolf, swinging the torch in wide arcs. The predators scattered, unwilling to challenge fire and the thundering hooves of the horse. "Get on!" the man shouted, extending his hand to Sarah without taking his eyes off the retreating wolves. His voice carried an accent, but his English was clear. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed his arm and let herself be pulled onto the horse behind him. The stallion reared, then bolted forward, leaving the wolf pack behind in a cloud of dust and torchligh. As they rode, Sarah clung to the stranger's buckskin-clad back, her heart still racing. Over the sound of hoofbeats, she managed to find her voice. "Thank you," she said breathlessly. "They would have killed me." The man didn't respond immediately, focused on guiding his horse through the darkness that had now fully enveloped the landscape. When they reached a clearing some distance away, he finally slowed the animal to a trot and then a walk. "You shouldn't be out alone at this hour," he said, glancing back at her. In the fading torchlight, Sarah could see his features more clearly: strong cheekbones, dark eyes, and skin weathered by the sun. His long black hair was tied back with a leather cord. Though dressed in a mixture of traditional and settler clothing, his Comanche heritage was unmistakable. I lost track of time, Sarah admitted. I'm Sarah Miller. My father and I have a homestead about a mile east of here. I know of it, he replied. I am Tab. You saved my life, Tabe, she said. My father will want to thank you properly when he returns from Austin. A hint of a smile crossed Tabe's face, though his eyes remained cautious. The wolves have been hungry this season. The drought has driven away much of their prey. As they approached her cabin, Sarah felt a strange reluctance to end this unexpected encounter. The Comanche and settlers had an uneasy peace in this part of Texas, with most interactions limited to tense trading or outright conflict. Yet here was Tabib, who had risked himself to save a stranger. Will you come inside? Sarah offered as they reached her home. I can offer you food and water for your journey. Tab hesitated, then nodded once, for a short while. As Sarah lit the oil lamps inside the modest cabin, she watched Tab take in his surroundings with careful, observant eyes. There was a story here. She thought, a story of how a Comanche warrior came to be riding alone at twilight, just in time to save a settler woman from certain death. And somehow, Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The amber glow of the oil lamps cast long shadows across the cabin's wooden floor as Sarah placed a plate of cornbread and dried venison before Tabe. He sat with his back straight, eyes continuously scanning the humble interior of the Miller homestead, from the hand-sewn curtains to the worn Bible on the shelf. It's not much, Sarah said, pouring him a cup of water, but it's what we have. Tav nodded in thanks, taking the cup with calloused hands. It is more than enough. As he ate, Sarah studied him more carefully. Though young, perhaps 25 or 26, his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen much hardship. A thin scar ran across his left forearm, and she noticed he favored his right side slightly. You're not with your people, she observed cautiously, settling into the chair across from him. Tabe's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his dark eyes. No, he said simply. After a moment of silence, he added, not anymore. The weight behind those two words told Sarah not to press further, at least not yet. Instead, she asked, how did you come to be riding near our land at nightfall? I have been tracking that wolf pack for 3 days, he explained, breaking a piece of cornbread. They killed a settler's calf near the Brazos River. Then a child went missing from a homestead farther north. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. A child? Dear God. Tav nodded grimly. The tracks showed the wolves had moved south. I followed. Alone? That's dangerous even for the most skilled hunter. A hint of a smile touched his lips. I was raised to hunt more dangerous prey than wolves, Sarah Miller. The way he said her name with careful pronunciation of each syllable made her realize how rarely she heard it spoken aloud. Since her mother's passing, it had been just her and her father, working side by side in comfortable silence most days. Will you continue tracking them tomorrow? She asked. Yes, they must be dealt with before they grow more bold. He sat down. His cup. Your father, he leaves you alone often? The question carried no judgment, only curiosity. Only when necessary. He's gone to Austin for supplies and to sell our extra crops. The journey takes about 5 days round trip. Sarah smoothed her skirt nervously. He should return tomorrow. Tav seemed to weigh something in his mind before speaking again. The wolves know your scent now. They may return. The realization sent a chill through Sarah. She hadn't considered that the predators might remember her, might seek her out again. I have my father's rifle, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Tav studied her for a long moment. I will sleep outside tonight. My horse will alert me if the pack returns. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. You don't have to do that. You've already saved my life once today. And it would be wasted effort if you were killed tomorrow, he replied pragmatically, though there was a gentleness to his tone that belied his blunt words. As night deepened around the small cabin, Sarah prepared a bedroll for Tab to use on the porch. When she handed it to him, their fingers brushed briefly. "Thank you," she said quietly. Not many in these parts would help a settler woman. Tabe's face remained unreadable, but he nodded. Not many settlers would invite a Comanche into their home. "Times are changing," Sarah offered. "Yes," he agreed, a hint of sadness in his voice. "That they are." Before retiring to the porch, Tabe paused at the doorway. "Your father, will he be troubled to find you accepted help from a Comanche?" Sarah considered this. Her father was a fair man, more progressive than most settlers, but the tensions between whites and natives ran deep in Texas. "He values life above all else," she finally answered. "He will be grateful." Tabe seemed satisfied with this response and stepped outside into the cool night air. Sarah watched through the window as he tended to his horse, speaking softly to the animal in his native tongue. There was a fluid grace to his movements, an awareness of his surroundings that came from a lifetime of survival in harsh conditions. Sleep came fitfully to Sarah that night. Twice she awoke, heart pounding from dreams of amber eyes and snapping jaws. Each time, she found comfort in knowing Tab kept watch outside. Dawn broke in a symphony of pink and gold across the Texas sky. Sarah rose early and found Tab already awake, kneeling beside a small fire he had built a safe distance from the cabin. "Good morning," she called, approaching with a pot of coffee. He looked up, his face softened by the morning light. "The wolves did not return." "Thanks to you," she said, pouring him a cup of the steaming brew. "Will you stay for breakfast before you continue tracking them?" Tab accepted the coffee with a nod. "A short meal, then I must go. The trail grows colder with each passing hour." As Sarah prepared a simple breakfast of biscuits and preserves, she found herself with 100 questions about this solitary Comanche who had saved her life. Why was he alone? What had separated him from his people? Where had he learned to speak English so well? But before she could voice any of these thoughts, the distant sound of hoofbeats caught their attention. Tab was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the knife at his belt. "Are you expecting visitors?" he asked, voice suddenly tense. "No," Sarah replied, straining to see down the path that led to their property. "Unless it could be my father returning early." Sure enough, minutes later, a wagon appeared on the horizon, driven by a bearded man in a weather-worn hat. Sarah's face broke into a relieved smile. "It's him." "It's my father," she confirmed, waving toward the approaching wagon. Tab visibly relaxed, though he remained standing, his posture alert. "Then it is time for me to leave. Please stay," Sarah urged. "My father would want to thank you properly." Tab hesitated, looking from Sarah to the approaching wagon and back again. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that their unexpected encounter had created a connection, tenuous but real. "Very well," he finally agreed, though she could see the caution in his eyes. "I will stay to meet your father." As Thomas Miller's wagon drew closer, Sarah felt a strange fluttering in her chest, mixture of relief at her father's return and anxiety about how he would receive her Comanche savior. The meeting of these two men from different worlds would change something, though Sarah couldn't yet know exactly what or how. What she did know was that the howl of wolves at twilight had set in motion events that would prove to be more significant than she could possibly imagine. Thomas Miller's wagon creaked to a halt in front of the cabin, dust settling around the wheels as he set the brake. His weathered face broke into a smile at the sight of his daughter, but quickly shifted to wary surprise when he noticed Tabe standing nearby. "Sarah?" he called out, his hand instinctively moving toward the rifle secured beside his seat. "It's all right, Pa," Sarah hurried forward, placing a reassuring hand on her father's arm. "This is Tab. He saved my life yesterday." Thomas's bushy eyebrows drew together as he climbed down from the wagon, his movements stiff from the long journey. "Saved your life? What happened?" Sarah quickly recounted her encounter with the wolf pack and Tabey's timely intervention. As she spoke, Thomas's expression gradually softened, his eyes moving from his daughter to the stoic Comanche, standing a respectful distance away. When Sarah finished her tale, Thomas approached Tabey, removing his hat and extending his hand. "Seems I owe you a debt I can never repay, sir. My daughter is all I have in this world." Tab hesitated only briefly before accepting the handshake. "No debt. The wolves have become a danger to all who live in these lands." Thomas nodded, studying. The young man with newfound respect. "Please, join us inside. I've brought fresh supplies from Austin, and it seems we have cause for celebration." The three of them entered the cabin, where Sarah busied herself preparing a more substantial breakfast with the provisions her father had brought. Thomas and Tab sat at the small wooden table, an awkward silence stretching between them until Thomas cleared his throat. "You're not with your tribe," he observed, echoing Sarah's earlier comment. Tabey's face remained impassive. "No, forgive my directness," Thomas continued, "but that's unusual for a Comanche warrior." Something in Tabey's expression shifted, a brief flash of pain quickly masked. "The old ways are dying, Mr. Miller. Some of us must find new paths." Thomas nodded slowly. "Call me Thomas. And yes, times are changing for all of us." He glanced at the window, where the vast Texas landscape stretched toward the horizon. "This land has seen too much bloodshed between your people and mine. Yet here we sit," Tab replied, sharing a table. A small smile creased Thomas's weathered face. "Indeed we do." Sarah placed plates before them, fresh biscuits, bacon, and eggs, along with steaming cups of coffee. As they ate, Thomas shared news from Austin. Railroad expansion was continuing westward. More settlers were arriving each month, and the U.S. Army had increased its presence along the frontier. "They say the last of the free Comanche will be on reservations within a year," Thomas said, then winced, realizing the insensitivity of his comment. Tabey's expression didn't change. "They have been saying that for many years now." "Pa," Sarah interjected, changing the subject, "Tab has been tracking the wolf pack that attacked me. They've been killing livestock and ... She hesitated. ... There was a child taken from a homestead north of here." Thomas's face darkened. "The Henderson's boy?" Tab nodded. "I found tracks 3 days ago. Too late to help the child." A heavy silence fell over the table. "Those wolves need to be stopped," Thomas finally said. "I'm not much of a hunter anymore. My eyes aren't what they used to be, but I know these lands well." Tab studied the older man. "You're offering to help track them?" "I am," Thomas confirmed. "Two is better than one for such a task, and after what you did for my Sarah, it seems only right." Sarah watched this exchange with a mixture of surprise and concern. Her father, though fair-minded, had always kept his distance from the native peoples. Yet here he was, offering to join forces with a Comanche warrior. "The wolves will be difficult to find now," Tab explained. "They will have moved on after yesterday's encounter." "All the more reason to start soon," Thomas replied. "We can leave at first light tomorrow, if you're willing to wait." Tab considered this for a long moment before nodding his agreement. "Until tomorrow, then." As the day progressed, an unusual domesticity settled over the Miller homestead. Thomas unloaded supplies from his wagon, with Tabby silently offering his assistance. Sarah tended to her daily chores, frequently glancing at the two men working side by side, an image she never thought she'd witness. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues, Thomas pulled out his pipe and packed it with tobacco. "You speak our language well," he commented to Tabby. "Better than any Comanche I've encountered." Tab watched the smoke curl from Thomas's pipe. "I spent 2 years at the mission school near Fort Sill." "Willingly?" Thomas asked, then immediately regretted his bluntness. A hint of a sad smile touched Tabey's lips. "No, few go willingly to learn the white man's ways. Sarah, sitting on the porch steps, asked softly, "Is that why you're not with your people now? Because you learned our language and customs?" Tob was silent for so long that Sarah thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but clear in the evening stillness. "My father was a war chief who refused to surrender. He died fighting the Bluecoats 3 winters ago. My mother and sisters were taken to the reservation. I was sent to the school." His dark eyes reflected the fading light. "When I returned to my people, I was caught between worlds, too Comanche. For the whites, too white for the Comanche." The simple honesty of his words hung in the air, a truth rarely spoken aloud in the complicated tapestry of the American frontier. "So you ride alone," Thomas said, not as a question but as an understanding. "I follow the old hunting ways," Tob confirmed. "And sometimes I help where I can." Sarah felt a tightness in her chest, a recognition of the isolation Tob had described, so similar to the loneliness she'd experienced since her mother's death. Different worlds, similar pain. "You're welcome here," she said impulsively. "Anytime, not just tonight." Thomas glanced at his daughter, surprised by her boldness but not disapproving. After a moment, he nodded in agreement. "She's right. Our door is open to you, Tob." The Comanche's face remained stoic, but something in his eyes softened. "Thank you," he said simply. As night fell fully, Thomas retired to his room, leaving Sarah and Tob alone on the porch. The stars emerged, brilliant points of light in the vast Texas sky. "Will you return?" Sarah asked quietly. "After you and my father tracked the wolves?" Toby studied the horizon, where the silhouettes of distant hills merged with the darkness. "Would you want me to?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation, surprising herself with her certainty. He turned to look at her then, his gaze direct and unguarded for the first time. "Then I will return." The promise hung between them, fragile but sincere, as the night sounds of the wilderness surrounded the small cabin, a momentary sanctuary in a changing world. Dawn broke with a thin veil of mist hovering over the land, turning the familiar Texas landscape into something ethereal and strange. Sarah stood in the doorway of the cabin, watching as her father and Toby prepared for their hunt. Thomas checked his rifle methodically, the movements born of decades of frontier life, while Tob secured supplies to his horse with efficient precision. "You'll be careful, won't you, Pa?" Sarah asked, handing her father a small bundle of food for their journey. Thomas's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Always am, darling. We'll be back before sunset if all goes well." Sarah turned to Tob, who was adjusting his horse's bridle. Their eyes met briefly, and she found herself unable to voice the same concern for him. It seemed presumptuous somehow, to worry over a man who had survived alone in this harsh country. Instead, she simply said, "Good hunting." Tob nodded, his expression softer than it had been the day before. "Bar your door while we're gone. The wolves may be far away by now, but caution is wise." "I've lived on this frontier my whole life," she reminded him with a small smile. "I know how to keep safe." A hint of respect flickered in Tobay's dark eyes. "Yes, I believe you do." As the two men rode away, following the trail that led west toward the hills where Sarah had encountered the wolves, she felt an unexpected sense of loss. The cabin, which had always been a sanctuary, suddenly seemed too quiet, too empty. Throughout the morning, Sarah busied herself with chores, mending clothes, preserving the last of the summer berries, and tidying the already neat cabin. But her thoughts continually drifted to the unlikely pair of hunters, wondering how they fared in their search. By midday, dark clouds had begun to gather on the western horizon, bringing the promise of a rare late summer storm. Sarah frowned as she hung the last of the laundry, hoping the rain would hold off until her father and Toby returned. The first drops began to fall as she completed her outdoor tasks, fat raindrops that quickly multiplied into a steady downpour. Thunder rolled across the sky, and Sarah retreated inside, lighting an oil lamp against the premature darkness brought by the storm clouds. Hours passed with no sign of the hunters. As afternoon turned to evening, Sarah's concern grew. Her father knew these lands well enough to find shelter, she reassured herself, and Tob was clearly skilled in survival. Yet she couldn't help worrying as the storm intensified, wind howling around the cabin's eaves like a living thing. When she heard hoofbeats approaching through the rain, Sarah rushed to the window, relief flooding through her. But as she peered through the rivulets of water streaming down the glass, her heart sank. There was only one rider approaching. Tob hunched forward in his saddle, one arm supporting a slumped figure seated before him. Sarah flung open the door and ran into the rain, heedless of the downpour. "Pa!" she cried, recognizing her father's form. Tob dismounted quickly, then gently lowered Thomas to the ground. Sarah could see blood on her father's shirt, dark and ominous against the wet fabric. "Help me get him inside," Tob said urgently. And together they carried Thomas into the cabin. "What happened?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with fear as they laid her father on his bed. "The wolves," Tob explained, his usual stoicism giving way to concern. "We tracked them to a ravine. Your father's rifle misfired in the rain. The Alpha attacked." Sarah's hands trembled as she cut away her father's bloodied shirt, revealing deep gashes across his chest and shoulder. "How bad is it?" She whispered. Taab single quotes as expression was grave but not hopeless. "I've seen worse wounds heal. But he needs care quickly." Working together, they cleaned and dressed Thomas's injuries. Tava produced small pouches of herbs from his saddlebag, creating poultices that he applied to the worst of the wounds. "Medicine from my people," he explained when Sarah looked at him questioningly. "It will help fight the fever that often follows wolf bites." Thomas drifted in and out of consciousness as they worked, occasionally murmuring incoherently. When they had done all they could, Sarah sank into a chair beside her father's bed, exhaustion and worry etched on her face. "You should rest," Tob told her, his voice gentle. "I will watch him through the night." Sarah shook her head stubbornly. "He's my father. I'll stay with him." Tob studied her for a moment, then nodded in understanding. "Then we will both watch." Through the long hours of the night, as rain continued to batter the cabin, Sarah and Tob maintained their vigil. They spoke little, but the silence between them was companionable rather than awkward. Occasionally their hands would brush as they changed Thomas's bandages or checked his fever. Each brief contact a small comfort in the uncertainty of the night. Near dawn, Thomas's fever broke. His breathing, which had been shallow and rapid, steadied into the deeper rhythm of healing sleep. Sarah nearly wept with relief when she felt his cooler forehead. "He will recover," Tob said with quiet certainty. Sarah looked up at him, noticing for the first time the exhaustion in his features, and a long scratch across his forearm that he hadn't mentioned. "You're hurt too," she said, reaching for his arm. Taab glanced down as if surprised. "It is nothing. A branch, not wolf claws." Nevertheless, Sarah insisted on cleaning and bandaging the wound. As she worked, a question that had been nagging at her finally found voice. "The wolves, did you kill them?" Tobey's expression darkened. "The Alpha is dead. I took its life after it attacked your father. The others scattered. They'll return, won't they, to hunt again? Perhaps. But not here, not for a long time." He met her gaze directly. "I marked this territory as my own." Something in his words sent a shiver through Sarah that had nothing to do with fear. As morning light began to filter through the cabin windows, Thomas stirred and opened his eyes. "Sarah," he murmured weakly. "I'm here, Pa," she said, taking his hand. "You're going to be fine." Thomas's gaze moved from his daughter to Tabi. "You brought me home," he said, his voice rough with pain but clear. Tob inclined his head. "As you would have done for me." A ghost of a smile touched Thomas's pale lips. "Guess we're even now, aren't we?" No, Tob replied seriously. What is between us is not a debt to be settled. Thomas studied the young Comanche for a long moment, then nodded slightly. No, it's not. In the days that followed, as Thomas slowly regained his strength, Tob remained at the Miller homestead. He hunted for fresh meat, repaired damage to the cabin roof caused by the storm, and each evening shared stories of Comanche traditions around the fireplace. Sarah found herself drawn to his quiet strength and the wisdom that seemed beyond his years. They developed a routine of walking together at sunset, ostensibly to check the property boundaries, but increasingly for the simple pleasure of each other's company. One evening, as they stood watching the sun sink below the horizon, Tob turned to Sarah with unusual hesitation in his manner. I must leave tomorrow, he said. There are matters I need to attend to. Though she had known this moment would come, Sarah felt an unexpected pang of loss. Will you go back to tracking wolves? For a time, but then ... He paused, choosing his words carefully. I thought I might visit the Comanche at the reservation. My mother and sisters are there. Sarah nodded, understanding the significance of this decision. That would be good. Family should be together when they can. And afterward, Tob continued, his dark eyes intent on hers, I would like to return. Here, if that would be welcome. Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest, a feeling of hope she hadn't experienced since before her mother's illness. It would be very welcome, Tob. The next morning, as Tob prepared to depart, Thomas emerged from the cabin, moving slowly but steadily. He carried a package wrapped in oilcloth, which he presented to the young Comanche. My wife's father gave me this when I married his daughter, Thomas explained as Tabby unwrapped the package to reveal a finely crafted hunting knife with a bone handle. It seems fitting it should go to you now. Tob ran his fingers reverently over the blade. This is a gift of great value. I cannot. You can and you will, Thomas interrupted firmly. You're a part of our story now, Tabby. This knife belongs in your hands. After a moment of silence, Tob accepted the knife with a formal nod. I will carry it with honor. When the time came for final farewells, Sarah walked with Tob to his horse. The unspoken feelings between them seemed to fill the air, too new and fragile to be given voice just yet. How long will you be gone? She asked instead. 1 moon, perhaps 2, he answered. The reservation is far, and the journey is not always easy. Sarah nodded, fighting back unexpected tears. We'll be here when you return. Tob mounted his horse, his usual fluid grace momentarily halted as he looked down at her. Then, with deliberate care, he reached down and took her hand, squeezing it once before releasing it. Until then, Sarah Miller, he said softly. As she watched him ride away, Sarah felt not an ending but a beginning. A new chapter in her life that had started with a wolf howl at twilight and a Comanche war cry splitting the dusk. Whatever came next, she knew with certainty that their paths were now inexorably intertwined. 2 lives from different worlds finding unexpected common ground on the Texas frontier. Thomas came to stand beside his daughter, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder as Tabe's figure grew smaller in the distance. He'll come back, Thomas said with quiet certainty. Sarah smiled, her eyes still fixed on the horizon. Yes, she agreed. He will.